Have you ever noticed that a particular smell, like the scent of a rose, or a cup of coffee, or the ocean, or a forest, has the power to trigger an intense memory? What memories do smells trigger for you?
When I smell the ocean, it brings back all kinds of stuff, like collecting seashells with my grandma and going fishing with my dad. I love the beach.
The smell of dirt reminds me of a garden. When I think I was about 5 years old, when my sister and I planted a garden.
Cotton candy. Really brings me back to my childhood. A couple of times every summer, we would go up to this amusement park, and I always ordered cotton candy.
Smell seems to be a very powerful trigger of memory. So odors and tastes seem to be some of the most powerful stimulants for triggering memories in our brain.
To understand this complex connection of memory and smell, scientists like Professor David Glanzman of UCLA conduct experiments attempting to find out what happens in the brain on a cellular and biological level.
Your brain consists of 10 to the 12th neurons, which is approximately 1 trillion neurons. And each of those neurons makes a connection, which is referred to as a synapse, with approximately 1,000 to 10,000, and in some cases 100,000 neurons.
Glanzman believes that on a molecular level, the brain of a marine snail is like the brain of a human. Learning about the snail's brain can tell us about the kinds of changes that take place in our brains when we learn and form memories.
The reason why snails are great for this research is they're very simple, they have very simple nervous systems, and yet they still learn. And we expect that what we discover about learning and memory in their primitive nervous systems will apply to our brains as well. What we study are changes in the reflex. And when I tap the siphon, what the animal does is contract, and that's a defensive contraction. If I keep tapping it gently, it'll eventually stop giving me that withdrawal reflex, that defensive reflex. And what it's learning there is that this is not dangerous, so it's basically ignoring it. But if I give it a very painful stimulus, then it is learning that the environment is dangerous and it needs to be aware of that. So what we found in our research is that when the snail learns, synapses get stronger, and we've been able to understand the biochemical and molecular process by which that strengthening happens, and we think the same thing takes place in our brains when we learn.
Today, other scientists and neurologists are using new technology called MRIs to help them study this fascinating memory-smell connection. In experiments, they have found that the area of the brain that processes smell is located here, immediately next to the hippocampus and the amygdala, the parts of the brain that are known to control memory and emotion. The sense of smell has a powerful connection to memory and the brain. The loss of the ability to smell is often one of the earliest indications that there is something wrong in the brain.
People who have poor senses of smell, very poor senses of smell, often that's associated with clinical diseases of memory, such as Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease is a very devastating disease of memory, and it's caused by the malfunction of certain types of proteins in your brain. Recent research indicates that these abnormal proteins are particularly prominent in the olfactory bulb, which is one of the main centers for smelling, and olfactory cortex. And it may be that first the disruption begins there, and then it spreads to the parts of the brain that are important for memory.
The knowledge we are gaining today can lead us to ways to cure and prevent diseases of the mind that destroy our most precious gift as human beings, our memories.
The smell of the ocean reminds me of when I was young. I was stung by a jellyfish on my chest, and it hurt.
The smell of potato pancakes reminds me of my childhood, my mother, actually my whole family, when I was very young.
The smell of gas reminds me of when I was young and my dad and I would fix cars together.